You'll work under her, Anthony Russo says, voice flat, final, offering no explanation whatsoever. Claire Whitmore's pen freezes mid-signature, ink bleeding slightly into the contract page beneath her hand. I'm sorry, she says carefully. Under who? Marisol Vega, Anthony says, not looking up from the papers scattered across his desk. Starting today. Claire's breath catches sharp in her throat, disbelief flooding through her entire body. Marisol, she repeats. The new hire? The one who started 3 weeks ago cleaning the East Wing offices. That's correct. Anthony, Claire says, voice tightening, I've run this office for 6 years. I've handled every deal, every client relationship, every crisis you've ever faced. And you're telling me I'll now report to someone with zero business experience. That's the arrangement, Anthony says, still refusing to meet her eyes, jaw tight with something he's clearly not willing to explain. Claire's hands begin trembling, humiliation and fury colliding hard in her chest. Why, she demands. Give me one reason. One actual reason, Anthony, and I'll consider it. Silence stretches between them, heavy and suffocating, Anthony's jaw working as if he's fighting against words he refuses to release. I don't owe you an explanation, he says finally, voice hardening into the cold authority that's made grown men across this city tremble. Something inside Claire breaks completely at those words. 6 years, she whispers, voice shaking. 6 years of loyalty, and that's what you give me. Not even a reason. She stands slowly, smoothing her blazer with hands that won't quite stop trembling, gathering the scattered dignity. Anthony's cold dismissal just shattered entirely. Claire, Anthony says, something almost uncertain crossing his controlled expression for the first time. This isn't about your competence. Then what is it about? She demands, voice cracking. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like you just told me my 6 years of work mean absolutely nothing. Anthony's jaw tightens further, old guardedness settling back into place like armor. I can't explain it right now, he says. Can't, Claire repeats, bitterness sharpening every syllable. Or won't. She doesn't wait for an answer. She turns, walking toward the office door with a composure that cost her everything to maintain, years of professional discipline the only thing keeping her spine straight and her steps steady. Claire, wait. No, she says, not turning back, voice trembling but absolute. I'm done waiting for explanations you clearly have no intention of giving me. She grabs her coat from the rack near the door, fingers fumbling slightly with the buttons, adrenaline and humiliation making her hands clumsy. The Delgado merger, Anthony says, voice tightening with sudden alarm. You're still handling that account. We will close in 4 days. Claire pauses at the doorway, something cold and deliberate settling into her expression. Marisol can handle it, she says. Since apparently she's qualified enough to be my superior. Claire, that's not. Goodbye, Anthony. The door closes behind her with a soft, final click, and Anthony sits frozen at his desk, staring at the empty space where 6 years of loyalty just walked out permanently. His phone buzzes almost immediately and he glances down, expression tightening further. A text from Marisol. I heard what happened. I never wanted this. Please, let me explain to her before this gets worse. Anthony doesn't respond, mind racing through the sudden, catastrophic reality of what he's just triggered. 3 floors below, Claire storms through the lobby, phone already pressed to her ear, voice sharp and controlled despite the fury still radiating off her entire body. Mr. Delgado, she says, I need to inform you of a change in your account management, effective immediately. She has no idea that this single furious phone call is about to unravel months of careful, delicate negotiation. She has no idea that Anthony's decision, born from a debt he's never known how to properly explain, is about to cost him not just his most loyal ally, but potentially his organization's most important deal in years. And Anthony, sitting alone in his office, staring at his silent phone, has no idea just how quickly his carefully guarded silence is about to unravel everything he's spent months building. Claire Whitmore built her career on precision. At 34, she spent the last 6 years mastering every detail of Anthony Russo's organization, from delicate client negotiations to the exact way he takes his coffee during high-stress meetings. She started as a temp, fresh out of a failed engagement and an even more failed attempt at law school, desperate for stability after years of feeling like her life kept slipping through her fingers. You're sharp, Anthony told her during her first month, watching her handle a difficult client dispute with calm, calculated grace. I don't say that often. Claire remembers that moment vividly, remembers the particular pride of finally being seen for competence rather than pitted for circumstance. She built genuine relationships within Anthony's network over those 6 years, none more important than her rapport with the Delgado family, whose merger with Anthony's organization represents months of careful, delicate trust building. Claire's the reason I trust this deal at all, Ricardo Delgado told Anthony directly just 2 weeks ago, during a particularly tense negotiation session. She's steady. Honest. I don't extend that kind of trust easily. Claire remembers Anthony's proud smile at that comment, remembers believing, foolishly, that her position within his organization was finally, genuinely secure. Now sitting in her car outside the office building, hands still trembling against the steering wheel, that memory feels like a cruel joke. Marisol Vega, meanwhile, sits alone in the break room upstairs, staring at her phone, guilt and confusion warring visibly across her exhausted features. She's 26 years old, the kind of exhaustion that comes from working 3 jobs simultaneously just to keep her mother's medical bills manageable. She started cleaning offices for Anthony's organization 3 weeks ago, grateful simply for steady, reliable income after months of unpredictable gig work. I don't understand, she whispers to her reflection in the break room window. Why would he do this to her? Why would he do this to me? She barely knows Anthony Russo beyond passing hallway greetings, has certainly never asked for any position beyond her current cleaning role, and now finds herself at the center of what's clearly become a devastating professional betrayal. Her phone buzzes, a text from her mother. How's the new job going, Mija? Proud of you. Marisol's eyes fill with tears, guilt crushing down harder at the thought of her mother's pride in a promotion she never requested and clearly doesn't deserve to have caused this much damage. She finds Anthony in his office 20 minutes later, knocking hesitantly despite the open door. Mr. Russo, she says quietly. Can we talk? Anthony looks up, exhaustion and guilt evident on his own face despite his usual controlled composure. Marisol, he says. Sit down. I didn't ask for this, Marisol says immediately, voice shaking slightly. I don't understand why you'd put me in a position I'm not qualified for, especially not at the cost of losing someone as valuable as Claire clearly was. It's complicated, Anthony says, jaw tightening. Then uncomplicate it, Marisol says, surprising herself with her own directness. Because right now I feel like I've ruined someone's career for a job I never wanted in the first place. Anthony studies her carefully, something raw and conflicted crossing his usually guarded expression. I owe your family a debt, he says finally, voice quiet. One I've never known how to properly explain. Marisol's brow furrows, confusion deepening. What debt? I don't understand. I can't explain it right now, Anthony says, echoing the exact words that drove Claire from this office less than an hour earlier. Marisol's frustration flares despite her natural deference. That's exactly what you told her, isn't it? And look what happened. Anthony's jaw tightens further, guilt visibly building behind his controlled exterior. I need time to figure out how to fix this properly, he says. Time, Marisol repeats, disbelief evident in her voice. Mr. Russo, respectfully, I don't think you have time. Whatever just happened with Claire, it felt serious. It felt permanent. Anthony's phone buzzes sharply, interrupting them both, and his expression darkens as he reads the incoming message. What is it? Marisol asks, an alarm creeping into her voice at his visible tension. The Delgado family, Anthony says grimly. Ricardo just requested an emergency meeting. Tomorrow morning. Is that bad? Ricardo Delgado doesn't request emergency meetings unless something's gone seriously wrong, Anthony says, already reaching for his jacket, mind racing through the catastrophic possibilities. He doesn't yet know that Claire's furious phone call has already begun unraveling months of careful trust, or that Marisol's accidental involvement in this mess is about to reveal a debt from 15 years ago that neither woman could possibly anticipate. The emergency meeting takes place in Ricardo Delgado's private office, tension thick enough to feel physically present in the room. Explain to me, Ricardo says, voice controlled but sharp, why I received a call yesterday from your former secretary informing me she's no longer handling my account, followed by radio silence from your organization for 18 hours. Anthony's jaw tightens. There was an internal restructuring. I apologize for the lack of immediate communication. Restructuring, Ricardo repeats, disbelief evident in his voice. Anthony, Claire Whitmore has been the reason I've trusted this merger for the past 4 months. She's steady, honest. And now she's gone, replaced by someone whose name I don't even recognize. Anthony's composure flickers slightly. Marisol Vega is fully capable. I'm sure she is, Ricardo cuts in, at whatever her previous role actually was. But that's not the point, Anthony. The point is you made a significant change to a deal worth millions of dollars without so much as a phone call to explain yourself. Anthony sits back, understanding the full weight of the damage settling heavy in his chest. What do you need from me, he asks quietly, to move forward with confidence? Ricardo studies him for a long moment, calculating. I need to understand why this happened. Real transparency, Anthony. Not vague corporate language. Anthony's jaw works silently, old habits of guarded silence warring against the obvious necessity of finally explaining himself. I can't discuss the specifics today, he says finally, and watches Ricardo's expression harden immediately. Then we have a problem, Ricardo says, voice cold. Because I don't sign multi-million-dollar mergers with organizations that operate on secrets and unexplained personnel upheaval. Ricardo. You have 72 hours, Ricardo says, standing, signaling the meeting's end. Give me a real explanation or genuine reassurance from someone I actually trust, or this deal is off entirely. Anthony leaves the meeting with his jaw tight, fury and panic warring uncomfortably beneath his controlled exterior. He calls Claire immediately, though he already suspects what her response will be. The call goes straight to voicemail. He tries again an hour later. Same result. Marcus, his head of security, finds him staring at his phone in his private office, expression unreadable. Boss, you look like you need something stronger than coffee. I need Claire Whitmore to answer her phone, Anthony says grimly. You could just go see her, Marcus suggests. In person. Might carry more weight than another unanswered call. Anthony considers this, jaw tightening with obvious reluctance. That requires explaining everything, he says quietly. The whole truth. Not vague gestures toward it. Boss, Marcus says carefully, with respect, your current approach isn't exactly working. Anthony's silence acknowledges the truth of that observation more clearly than any verbal response could. Meanwhile, across the city, Marisol sits in her small studio apartment, staring at old photographs spread across her kitchen table, photographs of a father she barely remembers clearly enough. Her mother, Elena, enters quietly, noticing the scattered images immediately. Why are you looking at these? Elena asks softly, settling into the chair across from her daughter. I need to understand something, Marisol says. Mr. Russo said he owes our family a debt. Something from a long time ago. Do you know what he's talking about? Elena's expression shifts instantly, old grief flickering behind her tired eyes. He said that, she whispers. Mom, what happened? What debt could a man like Anthony Russo possibly owe us? Elena's hands tremble slightly, reaching for one particular photograph. A younger version of Marisol's father, smiling broadly, arm draped around a much younger Anthony Russo. Your father worked for him, Elena says quietly. 15 years ago. Before you were born, actually right around when you were still a baby. Marisol's breath catches sharp. You never told me that. There wasn't much to tell, Elena says, voice thick with old, careful grief. He worked security. Good steady pay. We were happy for a while. For a while, Marisol repeats, understanding dawning slowly. What happened? Elena's composure cracks slightly, tears welling in her tired eyes. There was an attack, she whispers. Rival organization targeting Anthony directly. Your father was standing beside him when it happened. Marisol's whole body goes rigid, horror and understanding crashing over her simultaneously. He took the bullet, she whispers. Didn't he? That's what happened. That's the debt. Elena nods slowly, tears finally spilling over. He saved Anthony's life. And he never fully recovered from the injury. He passed 3 years later, complications from everything that happened that day. Marisol's hands press against her mouth, disbelief and grief colliding violently. 15 years, she whispers. He's owed us this debt for 15 years and he's never once mentioned it, never once tried to help us until now, this clumsy, humiliating attempt at repayment that's cost an innocent woman her entire career. He probably didn't know how to explain it, Elena says softly. Grief and guilt make silence feel safer than honesty, Mija. I understand that better than most people. Marisol sits frozen, processing this devastating revelation, understanding finally settling into place around Anthony's strange, unexplained decision. But understanding the reason doesn't fix what's already broken. Claire is gone. The Delgado deal is collapsing. And Marisol has no idea how to fix a situation Anthony himself seems entirely unwilling or unable to properly address. 15 years ago, Anthony Russo was 28 years old, still relatively new to leading his organization after his own father's sudden death left him in charge far earlier than he'd ever expected. He was cocky then in ways he spent 15 years since trying to correct, convinced his youth and ambition made him untouchable against threats older, more experienced men in his position took far more seriously. Marisol's father, David Vega, worked as one of Anthony's personal security detail, a quiet, steady man who'd immigrated from Colombia a decade earlier, determined to build a stable life for his wife and infant daughter. "You take unnecessary risks," David told Anthony once, watching the young boss walk casually through a neighborhood known for rival territorial disputes. "Confidence is good. Recklessness gets people killed." Anthony remembers laughing off the warning at the time, young and arrogant enough to believe his organization's reputation alone provided sufficient protection. He was wrong. The attack happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, outside a restaurant where Anthony was meeting with associates, rival gunmen emerging from a parked van with weapons already raised. Anthony remembers the exact sound first, sharp, violent, world-shattering, before his mind fully processed what was happening. David moved before anyone else could react, body already positioned between Anthony and the gunfire, years of careful training overriding any instinct toward self-preservation. The first bullet caught David in the shoulder, spinning him slightly. The second caught him in the abdomen, dropping him to the pavement hard, blood already pooling beneath him. "David!" Anthony remembers screaming, finally shoved to safety by his other security detail, watching helplessly as the man who'd just saved his life collapsed onto cold concrete. The attack ended within seconds, rival gunmen fleeing before proper retaliation could even be organized, leaving chaos and blood and a man fighting for his life on the sidewalk. Anthony rode with David to the hospital, gripping his hand tight, watching paramedics work frantically to stabilize a wound that would ultimately never fully heal. "You didn't have to do that," Anthony told him later, once David regained consciousness, voice thick with guilt and gratitude intertwined. "You didn't have to take that bullet for me." "It's my job," David said weakly, though something in his exhausted eyes suggested it was more than simple professional duty. "You're going to do great things, Anthony. Someone needed to make sure you got the chance." David survived that day, but the injury never fully healed properly, chronic pain and declining health slowly consuming a man who'd once been vibrant, strong, endlessly capable. Anthony visited regularly during those following years, provided medical coverage, ensured David's family never struggled financially, but he never quite knew how to address the deeper debt hanging silently between them. "You don't need to keep thanking me," David told him once, exhausted and weakened but still carrying dignity despite his declining health. "You just need to keep becoming the man worth saving that day." Anthony carried those words with him, tried genuinely to build an organization worthy of the sacrifice David made, but the guilt never fully dissipated, especially not after David finally succumbed to complications 3 years after the initial attack. Anthony attended the funeral, standing at the back of a small church, watching a young widow and an even younger daughter grieve a man whose sacrifice most people in attendance never fully understood. "I should do something for them," he told his advisors afterward, voice heavy with guilt he still didn't know how to properly express. "You've already covered medical expenses, funeral costs," his advisor pointed out. "What more do you think you owe them?" "Everything," Anthony said quietly. "I owe them absolutely everything." But guilt, Anthony discovered over the following years, doesn't translate easily into meaningful action, especially for a man raised to believe vulnerability and open explanation were weaknesses to be carefully guarded against. He watched from a distance as Elena and Marisol struggled, occasionally providing anonymous financial assistance through channels designed specifically to avoid direct acknowledgement, never quite finding the courage to explain the debt directly. When Marisol applied for a cleaning position within his organization 3 weeks ago, Anthony recognized her name immediately, felt 15 years of buried guilt resurface with sudden, overwhelming intensity. "Give her the position," he told his hiring manager, voice tight with emotion he refused to fully explain even to his own staff. He watched her from a careful distance those first 3 weeks, noting her quiet diligence, her obvious exhaustion from working multiple jobs, and something inside him finally decided the debt required more than careful, anonymous distance. "I want to elevate her position," he announced abruptly without proper explanation, believing in his flawed, guilt-driven logic that placing her above Claire somehow represented meaningful repayment for a sacrifice he's never known how to properly honor. He never considered, in his rushed, emotionally clumsy decision, exactly what that abrupt elevation would cost Claire, or how devastatingly unfair the entire situation would feel to both women involved. "I thought I was finally doing something right," he admits to Marcus now, voice heavy with regret. "Instead I destroyed Claire's trust and put Marisol in an impossible position, all because I still don't know how to just say the truth out loud." Marcus studies him carefully. "Then maybe it's time you finally learn." Anthony's jaw tightens, old guardedness warring against obvious necessity. "The Delgado deal collapses in 3 days," he says. "Claire won't answer my calls. Marisol feels guilty for something she never asked for. I don't know how to fix any of this." "You fix it," Marcus says simply, "the exact way you should have started. By actually explaining yourself. To everyone." Anthony sits with that advice, 15 years of careful, guarded silence finally cracking under the weight of everything his avoidance has cost. He doesn't yet know that Claire, in her fury and hurt, is about to make a decision that will either permanently sever their professional relationship or, if he moves fast enough with genuine honesty, might just save everything he's currently on the verge of losing. Claire sits in her apartment that evening, laptop open, resignation letter drafted and ready to send to every major client contact she's built over the past 6 years. A final, furious act of professional severance. Her phone buzzes. Unknown number. She almost doesn't answer. Something makes her. "Hello. Ms. Whitmore, this is David Chin from Sterling Capital. I understand you're currently between positions." Claire's brow furrows, surprise cutting through her lingering anger. "How did you hear that?" "Word travels fast in this industry," Chin says smoothly. "We've been looking for someone with exactly your reputation and client relationships. Are you interested in discussing an opportunity?" Claire hesitates, professional instinct warring against the satisfaction of pure vindictive validation. "I might be," she says carefully. "Wonderful. Could we meet tomorrow? I should mention we're particularly interested in your relationship with the Delgado family. Their business would be significant for our firm." Claire's stomach twists slightly at that specific mention, old loyalty warring uncomfortably against fresh fury. "I'll think about it," she says, ending the call, staring at her phone with growing unease. Something about the timing feels too convenient, too precisely targeted at exactly the relationship Anthony's organization desperately needs to preserve. She calls Ricardo Delgado directly, unable to shake her unease. "Ricardo, it's Claire. I need to ask you something strange. Has anyone from Sterling Capital reached out to you recently?" A pause, heavy and telling. "Actually, yes. Yesterday. Suggesting they could offer better terms than Anthony's organization, mentioning specifically that you'd left his employment." Claire's blood runs cold, understanding crystallizing with sickening clarity. "Ricardo, I think someone's deliberately trying to poach your business by exploiting my departure." "That thought occurred to me too," Ricardo admits. "Claire, I trust you. Genuinely. But I still need answers from Anthony before I make any decisions about this merger." Claire ends the call, mind racing, old professional instinct refusing to simply let this situation unfold without understanding the full picture. She calls Marisol next, surprising herself with the decision. "Hello." Marisol's voice, cautious, uncertain. "This is Claire Whitmore," Claire says, voice tight but controlled. "I need to ask you something and I need an honest answer." "Okay," Marisol says, voice small. "Did you ask for this promotion?" "Genuinely." "No," Marisol says immediately, voice breaking slightly. I swear to you I had no idea this was happening until Anthony announced it. I've been trying to understand it myself. Claire's fury softens slightly, hearing genuine distress in Marisol's voice. Do you know why he did it? Marisol hesitates, clearly weighing how much to share. I found something out today. About my father. About a debt Anthony's apparently owed my family for 15 years. What debt? Marisol explains quickly, voice thick with emotion, sharing the story of her father's sacrifice, Anthony's guilt, his clumsy, poorly executed attempt at repayment. Claire sits frozen, processing this unexpected revelation, old anger warring against fresh understanding. That still doesn't excuse how he handled it, she says finally, though her voice carries less bitterness now. No, Marisol agrees. It really doesn't. I told him that myself. Claire's phone buzzes with another call. Sterling Capital again. I need to go, Claire tells Marisol. But thank you for being honest with me. She answers the incoming call, voice sharp with fresh suspicion. David Chin. Ms. Whitmore, have you had time to consider our offer? I have, Claire says carefully. Tell me honestly, is this offer connected to poaching the Delgado account from Anthony Russo's organization? A telling pause. I'm not authorized to discuss specific client acquisition strategies. That's answer enough, Claire says, fury sharpening her voice. You're trying to exploit a personal conflict to steal a client relationship I spent months building honestly. Ms. Whitmore, I think you're misunderstanding. I understand perfectly, Claire cuts in. Don't contact me again. She ends the call, sitting back against her couch, old professional loyalty and fresh anger colliding uncomfortably. Her phone buzzes again immediately. Anthony this time. She stares at the screen for a long moment before finally answering. What? She says flatly. Claire, thank God. I need to explain something. Please just give me 5 minutes. You had 6 years to explain things properly, Claire says, though her voice lacks its earlier sharp edge. Why should 5 minutes suddenly matter? Because Sterling Capital is trying to poach the Delgado account by exploiting what happened between us, Anthony says urgently. And because you deserve the truth I should have given you from the beginning. Claire's breath catches sharp. How do you know about Sterling Capital? Ricardo called me an hour ago, furious, demanding answers before he'll consider anything further with this merger, Anthony says. Claire, please. Just 5 minutes. Claire sits in tense silence, old loyalty and fresh hurt warring visibly even through the phone line's silence. Fine, she says finally. 5 minutes. My apartment. Tonight. Anthony arrives 40 minutes later, expression tight with a vulnerability Claire has genuinely never witnessed from him in 6 years of working together. Talk, she says, arms crossed, standing firm in her doorway, refusing to fully let him inside yet. 15 years ago, Anthony begins, voice rough, a man named David Vega took a bullet meant for me. Claire's expression shifts slightly, surprise cutting through her guarded posture. He saved my life, Anthony continues. He never fully recovered from the injury and he died 3 years later from complications. He left behind a wife and an infant daughter. Marisol, Claire says quietly, understanding beginning to dawn. Marisol, Anthony confirms. I've spent 15 years trying to figure out how to properly honor that debt and I've failed at every single attempt, including this most recent catastrophic one. Claire's arms slowly uncross, old anger softening slightly beneath genuine understanding. That still doesn't explain why you didn't just tell me, she says. 6 years, Anthony. I deserved honesty regardless of what debt you were trying to repay. You're right, Anthony admits, voice heavy with genuine regret. I've spent my entire life believing silence meant strength, that explaining myself meant weakness. I was wrong. I was wrong, and it cost me the most loyal person I've ever worked with. Claire studies him carefully, exhaustion and cautious understanding warring across her tired features. Sterling Capital is trying to steal the Delgado account, she says finally. Someone's exploiting this mess for their own gain. I know, Anthony says grimly. Which is exactly why I need your help fixing this if you're willing to consider it. Claire's jaw tightens, old professional instinct warring against genuine hurt still lingering beneath the surface. I need more than an explanation, she says finally. I need to know this won't happen again. that you'll actually treat me and Marisol with the transparency we both deserve. I promise, Anthony says, voice absolute despite its unusual vulnerability. Whatever it takes, Claire. I promise. She doesn't yet know that saving the Delgado deal is about to require all three of them working together, directly confronting Sterling Capital's manipulative interference before Ricardo Delgado loses patience entirely and walks away from the merger permanently. The meeting with Ricardo Delgado takes place the following morning, tension thick enough to feel physically present in the room as Anthony, Claire and Marisol arrive together. Ricardo's eyebrows raise slightly at the unexpected trio. This is an interesting development. Ricardo, Anthony says, voice steady despite the obvious vulnerability required for what he's about to do. I owe you a real explanation. And an apology for the lack of transparency that's already cost this deal significant trust. Ricardo leans back, arms crossed. I'm listening. Anthony explains everything. David Vega's sacrifice, 15 years of guilt, his clumsy, poorly executed attempt at repayment, and the genuine damage his silence caused to both Claire's career and this critical merger. Ricardo listens without interruption, expression gradually softening from suspicion into something closer to understanding. That's a genuinely moving story, he says finally. But it doesn't explain Sterling Capital's aggressive attempt to poach my business by exploiting this exact situation. That's the second issue we're here to address, Claire says, speaking directly for the first time. David Chin contacted me personally, offering employment specifically because he knew about my departure. He also contacted you, Ricardo, using that same departure as leverage. Ricardo's expression sharpens. You're suggesting this is coordinated exploitation. I'm certain of it, Claire says firmly. I have the recorded conversation confirming Sterling Capital's specific interest in acquiring your account through this exact vulnerability. She pulls out her phone, playing the recording she'd made during her earlier conversation with David Chin, his own words confirming the deliberate targeting. Ricardo's jaw tightens as he listens, fury visibly building behind his controlled composure. They've been circling this deal for months, he admits once the recording ends. I assumed their interest was simply competitive. I didn't realize they were actively waiting for an opportunity to exploit internal conflict. They found their opportunity, Anthony says grimly, because I created it through my own poor judgment. Marisol speaks up for the first time, voice steady despite obvious nervousness. Mr. Delgado, I want you to know I never asked for this position. I've spent the past 2 days trying to understand how to fix the damage this situation caused, both to Claire and to your trust in this organization. Ricardo studies her carefully. Your father sounds like he was a genuinely remarkable man. He was, Marisol says, voice thick with emotion. I only recently learned the full extent of what he did for Mr. Russo. I wish I'd known sooner, honestly, so I could have helped navigate this more carefully from the beginning. Ricardo turns back to Anthony. What exactly are you proposing to fix this? Claire returns to managing your account directly, Anthony says. With full authority, full transparency, and my genuine apology for ever suggesting otherwise. Marisol remains employed within my organization, in a role that actually matches her genuine interests and qualifications, developed properly rather than rushed through poorly considered guilt. And Sterling Capital? Ricardo asks. I intend to ensure they understand exactly the consequences of exploiting internal conflicts to poach client relationships through unethical means, Anthony says, voice hardening with fresh resolve. Ricardo considers this for a long moment, calculating. I need one more thing, he says finally. Direct confirmation from Claire herself that she's willing to continue managing this account, genuinely, not simply because Anthony's asking her to. All eyes turn toward Claire, who takes a measured breath before responding. I've spent 6 years building trust with your family, she says. That trust matters to me independent of my relationship with Anthony's organization. I'm willing to continue, but only with the guarantee that decisions affecting my role will actually be explained to me going forward, not simply announced without context. That's fair, Anthony says immediately. I promise you that, Claire. Genuinely. Ricardo studies the three of them for a long moment, something shifting behind his calculating expression. Fine, he says finally. We proceed with the merger under the condition that Claire remains directly involved, and that this kind of unexplained internal upheaval never happens again. Agreed, Anthony says immediately, relief evident despite his controlled exterior. 3 hours later, Anthony sits across from David Chin in Sterling Capital's downtown office, voice cold with barely restrained fury. You attempted to poach a client relationship by deliberately exploiting internal conflict within my organization, Anthony says flatly. That's not competitive business practice. That's manipulation bordering on corporate sabotage. Chen's composure flickers slightly. I don't know what you're referring to. I have a recorded conversation confirming exactly what you attempted with Claire Whitmore, Anthony says, sliding his phone across the desk, the recording already queued. I also have documentation of your direct outreach to Ricardo Delgado, specifically citing her departure as leverage. Chen's face pales slightly as he listens to the recording, understanding the weight of the evidence now laid bare. What do you want? He says finally, voice tight. I want written confirmation that Sterling Capital will cease all further contact with the Delgado family regarding this merger, Anthony says. And I want assurance this kind of exploitative tactic never happens again with any of my clients or employees. You can't dictate our business practices, Chin protests weakly. I can ensure every relevant regulatory body and industry contact understands exactly how Sterling Capital conducts business when opportunities for exploitation present themselves. Anthony counters, voice absolute. That's not a threat. That's simply what happens next if you refuse. Chen's jaw tightens, calculating his rapidly diminishing options. Fine, he says finally, voice bitter but defeated. We'll withdraw our interest in the Delgado account. Today, Anthony says. Written confirmation within the hour. Back at Anthony's office that evening, Claire and Marisol sit together, watching Anthony finalize the confirmation paperwork with visible relief evident across his exhausted features. It's done, he says. The Delgado merger proceeds. Sterling Capital's interference is finished. Claire studies him carefully, exhaustion and cautious respect warring across her tired features. Thank you, she says quietly, for actually fighting for this instead of just letting it quietly fall apart. I should have fought for honesty from the beginning, Anthony says, voice heavy with genuine regret. That's on me, Claire. Entirely. Marisol watches the exchange between them, something settling into place after 2 exhausting, confusing days. What happens now? She asks quietly. For me, I mean, what's my actual role here? Anthony turns to her, expression softening. Whatever role genuinely fits your skills and interests, developed properly, not rushed through guilt-driven decisions. What do you actually want to do here, Marisol? Marisol considers this carefully, something hopeful flickering behind her exhausted expression for the first time in days. I'd like to learn the business side properly, she says. Not because I feel obligated to fill some debt you think you owe my family. Because I'm genuinely interested and I think I could actually be good at it, given proper training instead of an impossible promotion. Then that's exactly what we'll build, Anthony says, something warm crossing his usually guarded expression. Properly this time. With actual transparency. 3 weeks later, the office hums with an energy entirely different from the tense uncertainty that defined those chaotic first days. Claire manages the Delgado account with her usual precision, the merger now fully finalized, Ricardo Delgado's trust genuinely restored through weeks of consistent, transparent communication. I still can't believe how close we came to losing this deal entirely, Ricardo told Claire recently, during a celebratory dinner marking the merger's official completion. Your honesty throughout this process, even during the messiest parts, is exactly why I trust this partnership. Marisol, meanwhile, has settled into a genuine junior analyst position, working directly under Claire's mentorship, finally building actual business skills instead of navigating an impossible, guilt-driven promotion. I actually enjoy this, Marisol admits one afternoon, reviewing quarterly reports alongside Claire in the shared office space they now occupy. I wasn't sure I would, honestly, given everything that happened. You're good at it, Claire says, genuine warmth evident in her voice. Better than I expected, actually, given you're starting from scratch. Their relationship has evolved slowly but genuinely over these past 3 weeks. Old resentment softening into something resembling real mentorship, even friendship. I owe you an apology, Marisol says quietly one evening as they finish reviewing the day's final reports. For the position this whole situation put you in, even though it wasn't technically my fault. You don't owe me anything, Claire says firmly. Anthony's the one who owes both of us better communication going forward. You were just as caught in the middle of his poor judgment as I was. Anthony himself has visibly changed over these past 3 weeks. Small but meaningful shifts in how he communicates with his entire staff, actively working against 15 years of guarded, explanation-averse habits. I called a full staff meeting yesterday, he tells Claire and Marisol one afternoon, something almost sheepish in his usually controlled demeanor. Explained several decisions I'd normally have just announced without context. Felt strange, honestly. Uncomfortable. Good uncomfortable, though, Claire says, a small smile tugging at her expression. Growth usually feels uncomfortable at first. Tonight, the three of them gather in Anthony's office for what's become a regular check-in, discussing the Delgado account's continued progress alongside Marisol's developing skills. I found something, Anthony says, sliding a small framed photograph across his desk toward Marisol. David, from around the time he started working with me. I thought you might want it. Marisol's hands tremble slightly as she picks up the photograph, her father's warm smile captured mid-laugh, clearly comfortable and happy in a moment Marisol has no memory of witnessing herself. I don't have many photos of him, she admits, voice thick with emotion. Mom kept most of them, but a lot were lost when we moved apartments a few years back. I have more, Anthony says quietly. From those years he worked with me. I'd like to share them with you and your mother if you're both interested. Marisol's eyes fill with grateful tears. I'd like that. I think Mom would like that too. Claire watches this exchange with quiet satisfaction, recognizing genuine healing happening in front of her after weeks of complicated, painful unraveling. I've been thinking, Anthony says, turning to Claire, about how to properly thank you for staying, for fighting for this deal despite everything that happened. You don't need to thank me with grand gestures, Claire says. Just keep communicating honestly. That's genuinely enough. I intend to, Anthony says. But I also want you to know how much your 6 years of loyalty actually mean to this organization. I should have said that clearly a long time ago instead of just assuming you understood it. Claire's expression softens slightly, old hurt finally beginning to properly heal beneath genuine, consistent honesty. Thank you, she says quietly, for actually saying it now. The three of them sit together in comfortable silence, evening settling warm around the office, an ease between them that would have felt impossible just 3 weeks earlier. I want to formalize something, Anthony says eventually. A mentorship program connecting employees like Marisol with proper development opportunities, rather than rushed, poorly considered promotions. I'd help build that, Claire offers immediately. Genuinely. I think it could actually mean something given everything we've all learned through this mess. Me too, Marisol adds. I want other people to have proper opportunities, not the confusing, guilt-driven mess I got thrown into. Anthony watches them both, something warm and genuinely hopeful settling into his usually guarded chest. For the first time in 15 years, the guilt he's carried since David Vega's sacrifice feels less like a burden he's failing to properly repay, and more like the foundation for something genuinely meaningful he's finally learning to build correctly. 6 months later, the office buzzes with the kind of steady, confident energy that comes from genuine trust properly rebuilt over time. Claire has been promoted to senior partner, her 6 years of loyalty and recent demonstration of unwavering integrity finally receiving the formal recognition it always deserved. Marisol has completed her initial training program, now managing several smaller accounts independently, her natural aptitude for the business finally given proper room to develop. The mentorship program they built together has expanded significantly, connecting a dozen employees across Anthony's organization with genuine development opportunities instead of the confusing, poorly explained decisions that once defined internal promotions. I want to formally thank all three of you, Ricardo Delgado said recently, during a celebration marking the merger's continued success. This partnership has exceeded every expectation I had, precisely because of the transparency you've all committed to maintaining. Elena Vega, Marisol's mother, visits the office occasionally now, finally comfortable within a space that once represented complicated, painful history. Your father would be so proud of you, she told Marisol recently, watching her daughter confidently present quarterly projections during a team meeting. Not because of any debt being repaid, but because of who you've become through learning this properly. Tonight, the office hosts a small celebration marking the mentorship program's 6-month anniversary, warm lighting and easy conversation filling a space that once held nothing but tension and unexplained hurt. Anthony watches the celebration unfold, something genuinely content settling into his usually guarded expression. "I keep thinking about that day," he tells Claire quietly, watching Marisol laugh with several junior employees across the room. "The day I told you to work under her without any explanation at all." "I try not to think about it too often," Claire admits, a small smile softening her words. "Though I suppose it led us here eventually. It shouldn't have taken losing you, nearly losing the Delgado deal, and weeks of genuine damage before I finally learned to communicate honestly," Anthony says, voice heavy with old regret. "No," Claire agrees. "But you did learn eventually. That matters." Marisol joins them, carrying 3 glasses of champagne for their small informal toast. "To honesty," she says, raising her glass. "Even when it's uncomfortable. To second chances," Claire adds, "properly earned instead of rushed. To finally learn how to explain myself," Anthony says, something genuinely warm crossing his expression, instead of hiding behind silence. They clink glasses together, the simple gesture carrying weight far beyond its casual appearance. 3 people who navigated genuine hurt and confusion into something meaningfully rebuilt. Later that evening, as the celebration winds down, Anthony finds himself alone briefly on the office balcony, reflecting on everything that's changed since that catastrophic, unexplained decision 6 months earlier. Claire joins him quietly, 2 mugs of coffee in hand, settling beside him with the easy comfort of genuine professional respect built slowly over months of consistent honesty. "I never properly asked," Anthony says, "if you're actually happy here. After everything that happened." Claire considers the question seriously. "I am actually. Not despite what happened, but because of how it forced real change. I don't think we'd have built something this genuine without going through that mess first." "That's a generous perspective," Anthony says. "It's an honest one," Claire corrects gently. "Which is exactly what you taught me to value more, ironically, through failing to provide it initially." Anthony's expression softens further, genuine gratitude evident in his exhausted but content features. "Thank you," he says quietly, "for giving me the chance to actually fix this instead of just walking away entirely when you had every right to." "You earned that chance," Claire says simply, "through actually doing the work to deserve it. That's the thing about honesty, isn't it? It rarely feels easy or comfortable in the moment it's most needed." Anthony spent 15 years believing silence meant strength, that explaining himself meant vulnerability he couldn't afford to show. He learned, through genuine crisis and near-catastrophic loss, that real strength actually requires the courage to explain yourself honestly, especially when silence has already caused genuine harm. Claire spent 6 years building trust through quiet competence, only to discover that loyalty without transparency eventually reaches a breaking point no amount of dedication can properly sustain. She learned that walking away, even from something she'd invested years building, was sometimes the only way to demand the respect and honesty she genuinely deserved. So here's the question worth sitting with tonight. Has silence from someone you trusted ever cost you more than the truth itself ever could have? And if you were given the chance to rebuild that trust properly with genuine transparency this time, would you have the courage to try again? Tell me in the comments. Has choosing honesty, even when it felt uncomfortable or risky, ever ended up saving something important in your own life?